Hey guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. You don't always need polished camera work with great actors who are literally at the top of the game dealing with complex issues to have a movie work. What you need is the audience to be entertained. And mark our words, when you have the attention of your viewers, it means the film has basically done its job. With that being said, movies come in all shapes and sizes. They don't necessarily have to be a mainstream blockbuster for you to appreciate them. One can derive happiness even from a trashy flick, or say from films that particularly fall under the category of so bad they're good movies. Well, what better era to have your favorite guilty pleasure movies than the good old 80s? Mind you, one doesn't have to be born in the 80s to enjoy our list. So, are you ready? We know we are. Let's jump right into the video and find if your preferred guilty pleasure spectaculars from the 80s have made it to our list today. But before we get into our explanation, we do have one very small request. If you enjoy our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Now, let's begin. Gremlins, 1984. Backed by a highly intriguing screenplay by Chris Columbus, Joe Dante's Gremlins has Billy receiving a seemingly harmless furry little mogwai as a Christmas present from his father. Billy is told to follow 3 important rules regarding his new pet: no exposure to light and water, and most importantly, not feeding it after midnight. Well, it goes without saying that Billy inadvertently ends up breaking all the rules, which in turn has the otherwise peaceful town of Kingston Falls overrun by a swarm of clever, mischievous, and dangerous creatures who are hell-bent on wreaking havoc. Gremlins was a massive hit back when it released, and one of the primary reasons that make this movie a fun watch today is because it affably fits itself into so many genres, such as comedy, horror, and even fantasy for that matter. While special commendations have to be given to Dante for his wild and creative vision, Columbus also deserves the credit here because had it not been for him, the whole idea of these creatures would never have come into existence. In fact, you'll be surprised to learn that a bunch of mice basically inspired Columbus to make this movie in the first place. As per reports, back when Columbus was a New York University Film School graduate, he resided in a loft in Manhattan's Garment District. Columbus was occasionally frightened by a horde of mice that would scamper around at night, so much so that he went ahead, modified his fears to an extent, and made an ingeniously twisted Christmas classic out of it. Made at a time when one literally depended on the usage of practical effects over CGI, Gremlins is wickedly funny, and you must at least watch it once in your life, if you still haven't. Neon Maniacs, 1986. Well, one really has to see Joseph Mangin's horror film to believe that this movie actually exists. Starting out like a typical 80s slasher, Neon Maniacs has Natalie, a high school student, eluding death at the hands of the titular beings who dwell underneath the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Haunted and hunted, she tries to warn everybody about the rampaging army of gnarly, psychotic, nocturnal mutants, but of course, no one believes her. The question that remains is, will Natalie live to see another day? Those who have seen this ultra-bizarre film already know the answer, and as for the rest, we highly recommend that you do so, and at your earliest. Of course, the high points of this flick here are the nasty-looking Neon Maniacs, which in this case are ludicrous rubber-faced monsters, each with their unique disposition and special modus operandi. This film will not give you any reason to explain why things are happening, so don't expect anything from the threadbare screenplay. Simply go with the flow. Mangin has deliberately maintained a steady pacing throughout the runtime of 91 minutes with some spectacular moody lighting, eye-popping weird creations, and an unforgettable battle of the band sequence. Don't miss out on this low-end horror delight, and while you do give it a shot, please keep in mind that logic literally has no say here. The Wraith, 1986. Written and directed by Mark Marvin, this independently made action fantasy flick has Packard Walsh, the leader of a gang of car thieves, tormenting the town of Brooks in Arizona by forcing people with fast cars into racing so as to take ownership of their cars. Needless to say, Packard and his criminal gang are responsible for several horrifying events, and when it comes to Packard, he'll go to any extent to get what he wants. However, things change after the arrival of an all-black Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor supercar and its mysterious driver, where the latter is seen covered head-to-toe in black body armor, helmet, and metal braces. The Wraith was way ahead of its time, and even by today's standards, the film manages to keep the audience engaged with its thrills and excitement. More than Charlie Sheen, who plays the leading role in the movie, the excellent supporting cast makes up for his awkward performance. Special mention to Randy Quaid in the role of the sheriff trying to make sense of the carnage. Clint Howard as the memorable Rughead, and Nick Cassavetes as the head villain, who are accountable for making this movie highly enjoyable. Oh, it's an absolute feast for car enthusiasts. The film is fast-paced, features impressive cars and some very adrenaline-fueled car chasing sequences. In fact, we highly doubt how many of you know this, but The Wraith was just shot in a span of 27 days, and the director has often given credits to Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter and George Miller's Mad Max and Mad Max 2 as the movie influences behind the film. This is one cool movie with an irresistible 80s soundtrack that certainly deserves your attention. Savage Streets, 1984. Danny Steinman's teen vigilante exploitation movie has Linda Blair as a rebellious high school student who sets out on a violent journey of retribution against a reckless drug-dealing male gang after they end up gang-raping her handicapped sister and murdering her pregnant best friend. Savage Streets is packed to the brim with what one would usually address as trashy 80s delights. We're talking about razor blade earrings, punk hairdos, bad disco dancing, and dare we disregard blouse-ripping catfights, penned down by Norman Yonemoto and Steinman himself. What you're looking at happens to be a trash fest, and not just any, but one that dons its exploitation badge right on its very sleeves. Of course, the best way to enjoy this 80s sleaze that's literally at its best is by not taking it seriously at all, despite a leather cat-suited crossbow-wielding Blair really giving it her all. Boasting a killer soundtrack by Michael Lloyd and John D'Andrea, this cult classic deserves a good 90 minutes from your leisure time. The Lost Boys, 1987. Joel Schumacher's supernatural comedy horror film, which has a screenplay written by the terrific trio of Jeffrey Bone, James Jeremias, and Janice Fisher, follows brothers Michael and Sam moving to the fictional small beach town of Santa Carola with their recently divorced mother, unaware that the town is plagued by vampires. Things take a different turn when the beautiful star lures Michael, and he gets embroiled in the world of the creatures of the night. Agreed that there are plenty of movies about vampires, but the real deal with this cult classic here is that it pretty much redefined the vampire genre, with its brilliant blend of hip humor, horror, thrills, and laughs, and add to this the unapologetically 80s sartorial sense. Schumacher's Lost Boys was a masterpiece, especially in terms of its style, storyline, fantastic cast, outstanding musical score, and brilliant prosthetic makeup. A highly entertaining movie in its own right, and its modernization of the vampire myth. To call Lost Boys the epitome of excellent humor come horror would be an understatement, because it's highly unpredictable in terms of what's going to happen next. One time you're literally crawling at the edge of your seat, only to burst out laughing in the next scene. Also, it's fitting to say that the flick, which is to date remembered as one of the best movies of the 80s, literally has the best ending line, and those who have seen the movie know exactly what we're talking about. It's pure mindless entertainment that'll deliver what it promises, and that's definitely way more than just a horror movie for teens.
Eat left, froggies!
Hell Comes to Frogtown, 1988, co-directed by Donald G. Jackson and R.J. Kaiser, and backed by a never-seen-before screenplay co-written by Randall Frakes and Jackson. Hell Comes to Frogtown has the late Canadian professional wrestler and actor Roddy Piper, starring as Sam Hell, one of the few and last remaining fertile men in a post-apocalyptic world that humans and mutant amphibians populate. Believe us when we tell you that the movie's plotline alone makes this cult classic a must-watch. The casting choices for this film are fantastic. Special mention to the legendary William Smith for his thuggish portrayal of Captain Devlin, Rory Calhoun as Looney Tunes, Sek Varel as Sentinella, and Roddy Piper as the charismatic hero. Jackson, who also worked as the co-cinematographer in the movie along with Enrico Picard, did a great job with the lighting. Add to this good production design by Dins W.W. Danielson that helped create just the perfect futuristic look. Steve Wang also certainly deserves mention for his work on the frog makeup, the result of which happens to be some remarkably impressive creatures. But if we're to talk about the flick's highlight, it has to be Sandal Bergman's hot dance number for the Frogtown chief, Commander Toti. Hell Comes to Frogtown is totally worth your time. Megaforce, 1982. Hal Needham's Megaforce, which has been a recipient of 3 Golden Raspberry Awards nominations, revolves around a rapid deployment defense unit composed of international soldiers, who are equipped with state-of-the-art weapons and highly advanced vehicles. This high-tech secret army of top-shelf fighting men from all over the world is particularly called into action to resolve a conflict taking place between 2 fictitious desert nations. When you have a screenplay by Albert S. Ruddy, Andre Morgan, and Needham himself, the end result is an engaging oddball that has camp humor fused infused with extensive, highly intense battle sequences. Despite being co-produced by Golden Harvest and 20th Century Fox, Megaforce wasn't exactly a smash summer hit. The film has zero pretense to be anything other than exactly what it is: a loud action movie with heroic music in the background and an unforgettable Barry Bostwick wearing a head-to-toe spandex suit with his signature headband and riding a flying motorcycle. Truth be told, Megaforce was way ahead of its time and one of the coolest movies to have been ever made. If you ever wish to spend 99 minutes watching pure, mindless entertainment, you know what to do now. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 1989. Stephen Herrick's sci-fi comedy, which is backed by an exciting screenplay by Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, has two dim-witted high school teenagers, Bill and Ted, on the verge of failing their history class. If this happens, Ted will be sent to a military school in Alaska, which, also unbeknownst to the teenagers, will alter history in the future. So, when the duo ends up receiving help from a man from the future, they go back to various points in history to assemble renowned historical figures to complete their history assignment. Actors Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves are more than perfect in essaying their respective roles of the clueless explorers of the unknown. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure made history look so cool. And add to this the dumbness of the main characters that work wonders in favor of this time travel-themed movie. In fact, this 1989 film was actually one of the best portrayals of high school idiots in the history of Hollywood for that matter. We have a solid plotline, a highly complimenting background score by David Newman, and visual effects that are spectacular for the time and reasonably well even according to today's standards. It's a flick that defies logic, but then again, that's the whole point of this movie here. It doesn't take itself seriously at all, and you shouldn't either if you're planning to give this a shot. Maximum Overdrive, 1986. Directed by Stephen King and based on the King of Horror's short story titled Trucks, the narrative of Maximum Overdrive follows the events after Earth passes through the tail of a rogue comet, which in turn has all kinds of inanimate machines springing to life and causing a worldwide killing spree. Well, when we say killing spree, we're talking things like a gas pump spraying diesel in the eyes of its manager and blinding him on purpose, arcade machines electrocuting customers, and also vending machines firing canned sodas at point-blank range and literally causing death by doing so. What you're looking at happens to be King's only directorial effort, which, of course, is a classic example of machines coming to life and turning against their very makers. While it's true that the mere thought of machines suddenly becoming sentient beings and wanting humanity dead does send chills down the spine, Maximum Overdrive is all about fun and, may we add, ridiculously entertaining. An outrageous cult classic. The film shows no sympathy, even for kids. Believe us when we tell you that there's a particular scene that has a road roller flattening a child. And no, we're not kidding about it. The movie also has a truck with the face of the Green Goblin on the front that has a fair share of some gruesomely mechanized slaughter. Besides featuring Emilio Estevez, Laura Harrington, Yardley Smith, John Short, and the late Pat Hingle, the flick also has a great musical score by the famed Australian rock band AC/DC on display. Also, dare we disregard King's goofy cameo in the opening scene? Just sit back with a tub of popcorn and have the movie's daftness roll over you. Private School, 1983. Noel Black's teen sex comedy, which is also titled Private School for Girls, stars Phoebe Cates, Betsy Russell, Matthew Modine, and Michael Zarek, amongst others, and primarily revolves around two students of two separate boarding academies trying to plan their first night of passion together. In case we weren't clear enough, they're attempting to have sex with each other for the first time, but only if things were that simple. Well, for a movie with a tagline that says, "You won't believe what goes on and what comes off in Private School," it's pretty entertaining with almost no story to it. Now, to those of you who are wondering if that should be a problem, let us stop you right there. The fact that this movie literally has no storyline as such doesn't matter to fans of the genre at all. Also, the film surprisingly has its central romance played unpredictably straight. Next, we have a highly likable cast that's full of familiar faces, and they're guaranteed to make the viewers feel entertained. This 1983 amiable but bawdy comedy here that screams the 80s in every possible manner has quite a few high points, one of which happens to be an unforgettable sight of a topless Betsy Russell riding a horse. Well, what can one say? Private School has a high energy level that does get a little over the top at times, or does it not? It's best to leave this question to those who have seen the movie. To those who still have not, well, what exactly are you waiting for? UHF, 1989. Jay Levy's UHF is about George Newman, a daydreaming slacker who ends up becoming the manager of a low-budget television station that his uncle had won ownership of in a poker game. Surprisingly, Newman's unconventional programming choices turn his new job into a success. However, he also ends up earning the wrath of a major network station in the process. Co-written by Levy and Weird Al Yankovic, and in spite of the movie being deemed a failure, UHF eventually became a cult film. Indeed, this 1989 comedy flick isn't for all, but it's certainly one that can be enjoyed on various occasions. Yankovic deserves a special mention for his brilliant portrayal of George Newman, alongside actors David Bowe and Michael Richards. UHF features plenty of movie parodies, all of which, may we add, are spot on. Mind you, this isn't a flick that has a great story to tell. UHF, at the end of the day, happens to be a new way of showing Yankovic doing what he does best, and that is being himself. If you happen to be a loyal fan of this particular musician and comedian, and you've seen the movie, you know we're speaking the truth. Ninja 3, The Domination, 1984. How on earth is it possible that we're talking about guilty pleasure movies from the 80s and we don't mention Sam Furstenberg's Ninja 3, The Domination in the list? Of course, it'd be a cardinal sin to miss out on this particular Cannon Films production here. Written by James R. Silk, this martial arts action horror film here has the evil spirit of a fallen ninja possessing the body of a part-time telephone engineer and fitness instructor in an attempt to avenge his death from beyond the grave. It's absolutely fine if you've not seen the first two movies in the Ninja Trilogy anthology series. While it is true that the earlier two entries are also guilty pleasures in their own ways, mark our words when we say that nothing can beat Ninja 3, The Domination and its monumental madness. It's only fitting to say that this flick here screams all things 80s, given the well-choreographed exciting fight scenes, the retro fun, the laughable horror elements, the stupid dialogues, the lame acting, and dare we disregard the annoying soundtrack. Also, Lucinda Dickey steals the very show with her beauty and vitality. Weird Science, 1985. Based on Al Feldstein's 1951 pre-code comic Made of the Future, John Hughes' sci-fi comedy revolves around two nerdy social outcast students, Gary and Wyatt. The duo's disappointment at their direction in life and wanting more out of it leads them to create Lisa, the perfect dream woman. Needless to say, Lisa is more than just a woman or who they think she is, and it's only fair to say that she quickly ends up flipping the boys' lives upside down. Well, you're looking at a movie that had Hughes completing the screenplay within 2 days. Often regarded as one of Hughes' most memorable movies to date, Weird Science has a classic Hughes comic touch while dealing with the many aspects of teen angst, boasting a star-studded cast that includes Anthony Michael Hall, Ian Mitchell Smith, Kelly LeBrock, Bill Paxton, and Robert Downey Jr., amongst others. This movie is a fun, hysterical, and enjoyable trip through time. This 80s classic also has Ira Newborn providing a great soundtrack for the film. So if you tend to be someone who grew up in the 80s and still hasn't seen this movie here, well, you have to do it right away. Better be late than never. Hercules, 1983. To those of you thinking that we'll be mentioning Cannon films only once in this list, well, you're highly mistaken. The question isn't how could you, but why would you? Because when it comes to 80s trash cinema, you should know Cannon films unapologetically tops the list. Anyway, this brings us to Luigi Cozzi's 1983 Italian-American sci-fi fantasy adventure movie, one that's based on Greek mythology and mainly follows the very exploits of Hercules. This particular cult film is more like a retelling of Hercules engaged in a battle against the evil wizard King Minos, who wishes to take over the world by resorting to science. Of course, it's up to Hercules to stop him, and also save his lover in the process. Cozzi's camp classic has the incredible Lou Ferrigno in the titular role, and while many would say he's the movie's high point, we agree to disagree here. Addressing those who have seen the film here, how can you have no regard for the scene that literally has a bear flung into outer space? Or the one sequence that has a log thrown into space that smashes into another planet? Well, there are a few things that have to be seen to be believed, and Cozzi's Hercules has plenty of such things for you in store. Next, we have a bombastic soundtrack by Pino Donaggio, which makes the movie all the more appealing. Now, for people planning to watch this movie here, please pay heed to us when we tell you not to start to question the logic while watching it, because, well, if you do that, there's just no way you'll have fun with this one. Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon, 1985. Michael Schultz's The Last Dragon, which is written by Louis Van Oster, as a young martial arts student embarking on a spiritual journey to attain the final level of martial arts accomplishment that's known as The Last Dragon. A sheer treat for fans of Bruce Lee, The Last Dragon is a guilty pleasure that no one really talks about. Yet somehow it has the right blend of kung fu, romance, fantasy, and comedy all blended together with memorable lines that'll simply make you laugh and bring back your fondest memories. Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon is a major blast from the past that's not only incredibly cheesy, but also deceptively clever. In fact, you'll be surprised to learn that Denzel Washington had auditioned both for the role of Leroy and Sho'nuff, but the characters eventually landed on Timac and the late Julius Carry. To those of you attempting to watch this cult classic here, forget the corniness and just simply enjoy. Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, 1988. One has to admit that the 80s did boast some of the most outstanding scream queens, and there are no second thoughts about it. That being said, let's take a look at David DeCoteau's comedy horror film, which is primarily notable for iconic scream queens Leanna Quigley, Brinke Stevens, and Michelle Bauer all appearing together. Loosely based on W.W. Jacobs' classic horror short story, The Monkey's Paw, Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama has sorority pledges and their dorky peeping Tom stealing a trophy from a bowling alley, unaware that they've inadvertently released a devilish imp, one who's about to make their lives a living hell. Also known as the Imp at times, this movie is a complete no-brainer, low-budget comedy horror, which is infectiously funny. Quigley, Stevens, and Bauer are the high points of this movie here, and while it's shockingly true that one doesn't get to see a naked Quigley in the film, Bauer makes it up to an extent by playing what seems to be the world's slowest game of strip poker. Mind you, this flick was never meant to be an outstanding horror or comedy flick, so when a scene features somebody bowling with what seems to be a decapitated head, it shows that the movie never had any intentions of being serious at all. Don't be guilty if you tend to dig this goofy comic horror trash. Never Too Young to Die, 1986. Gil Bettman's action movie, which was a screenplay by Stephen Paul and Anton Fritz, revolves around a young man named Lance Stargrove, who teams up with his dead father's female spy colleague, Danya Deering, to take down the murderous, psychopathic, and highly powerful gang leader, Velvet von Ragnar. Ragnar, who takes pride in being both a man as well as a woman, is not only responsible for killing Lance's father, but is also planning a major terrorist attack. Of course, it's up to Lance to step into his father's shoes to settle scores. Believe us when we tell you that one literally has to see Never Too Young to Die to believe that the movie does exist in real life. The cast members such as John Stamos, the late pop star Vanity, and the veteran Gene Simmons categorically deserve mention. Stamos really throws himself into the role. Vanity is excellent, and so is Simmons as the villainous hermaphrodite. Mind you, any movie with the trio of Stamos, Vanity, and Simmons, and add to them George Lazenby and Robert Englund, there you have a rare gem, or in other words, a movie that's not meant to disappoint its fans. Call yourself a fan of delightfully crappy, cheesy action flicks? Well, look no further then. Reform Schoolgirls, 1986. Tom DeSimone's prison black comedy film tells the story of a young girl named Jenny, who's sent to a reform school for girls after being mixed up in a shootout. The school is operated by a brutal, sadistic warden who's seen playing favoritism with a few and punishing the rest like animals. Of course, things change after the arrival of Jenny, who makes it pretty clear that she's not come there to endure the torment and humiliation at the hands of the staff. Given that the movie ticks all the boxes of the exploitation subgenre, the cast is solid. Sybil Danning as the ruthless warden, Pat Ast as the sadistic second-in-command Edna, Wendy O. Williams in the role of Charlie, and Linda Carroll as the newcomer, Jenny. Boasting a runtime of 94 minutes, Reform Schoolgirls has an engaging plotline, maintains a consistent pace all throughout, and doesn't feature a single dull moment. We're not sure if this would be addressed as the ultimate women's prison flick, but back in the 80s, it definitely was. Well, what do you think? Do share your thoughts with us in the comment section below.
Guys, I don't think they exist.
The Princess Bride, 1987. Directed by Rob Reiner, this fantasy adventure comedy movie, adapted by the late William Goldman from his 1973 novel of the same name, tells the story of a swashbuckling farmhand embarking on an epic journey while navigating treacherous terrain and outwitting deadly foes to be reunited with his true love. You're looking at a cult film that's not only been considered one of Reiner's best works, but has also been regarded as one of the best movies of the 80s, a recipient of the 1988 Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation. The Princess Bride is a timeless classic, one that's packed with memorable lines, unforgettable characters, just the right blend of adventure, romance, and comedy. Backed by the late Adrian Biddle's cinematography and Mark Knopfler's musical score, The Princess Bride is well designed, well directed, and well acted. We highly recommend that you give this delightful classic here a must-watch and at your earliest. Marvelous verdict. Well, that's all for today, and with this, we finally come to the end of our video here. So, which of these guilty pleasure flicks from the 80s have you watched and also missed out on? Did your favourite movie make it to our list? We hope it did, and well, if it didn't, do let us know the names of the movies. Also, we'd love to know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Now, if you enjoy this video, you know what to do. Please do leave a thumbs up and stay tuned with us as we promise to come back with more exciting content. Till then, goodbye, and thanks for watching. Have a nice one.